Greetings, Saberites! Nonymous here. Well, Last Jedi is out, of course, and we did a couple of reviews. Very divisive movie, almost as divisive as the last one. I remember the same kind of thing. I think this is probably more divisive than the Last Jedi. But in the spirit of things, we want to keep the spirit going here. This is the review and analysis of the final fight from The Force Awakens. This lightsaber duel at the end between Kylo Ren, Finn, and Rey is definitely one of the highlights of the movie, highlights of the series. Absolutely love this fight. It takes. I mean, we'll go over all of the things that make it a successful fight. But one thing I have to say is that the mix of drama, character, and how it fits in with the action was really great. Something that I haven't seen done very successfully outside of, say, Hong Kong directors like Yuen Woo-ping and that kind of thing. I think the fighting and the choreography accentuates all of their characters. It delivers character background and dialogue, well, dialogue of course, but background into the characters through the action and through how they're fighting. And that's something that I think is really important to put into action sequences, especially things in properties like Star Wars, but also whenever you put a fight sequence in there, it would, these are things that are brought in. There is a fair amount of realism also brought to this fight that is lauded by a lot of other people, but I think one of the things other than the realism is there's a realism in everything, and even if it's not a realism, there's a believability to it. Everything is explained, everything is supported, so you know where everybody stands in this particular fight, how it's going, and there. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Now, the fight kind of takes place in two sections. First of all, there's the Finn and Kylo confrontation. This is the one we're all waiting for because we saw him igniting the saber in the trailer for The Force Awakens, and everybody was going nuts over that. So when he finally does, he comes barreling in at Kylo Ren. Now remember, the scene before this, Kylo Ren has just been shot by Chewie's bowcaster, a weapon we have seen throw stormtroopers several meters away. So it's a powerful thing. So he's wounded already, and that will come into play in this fight too, which is another brilliant thing that they put in there. So and he's angry. He just killed his dad. He's high with the dark side. He's buzzing. So when the fight starts, Finn, who knows nothing about fighting with a lightsaber or anything like that. However, he probably did have some combat training in Stormtrooper school. So they come busting in, and it opens pretty much how you like to see it. Finn is kind of chopping and hacking away at Kylo Ren. Very powerful, very overhead strikes, that kind of thing. And that's really what we expect to see from someone like Finn. He has a kind of intuitive sense how this thing works, and he's going to use it that way. Kylo, on the other hand, has training. Probably not a lot of training, and probably not a lot of experience live with other people using lightsabers. In the movie, we don't see any lightsabers being used by the Knights of Ren, and there's no necessarily indication that there was a duel between Luke and Kylo, but we'll see what transpires in there. So he comes in with some more technique. Now, from my point of view, it seems pretty obvious at the beginning of this fight. He's trying to knock that saber out of his hand. So there's a lot of really powerful just kind of swats at the blade. And again, because of the dialogue right before that, this saber belongs.
That lightsaber.
That saber belonged to me.
It belongs to me.
Right. There is. It's like he's trying to remove the saber from Finn's hand. That's his goal. He's not really trying to kill Finn. Probably doesn't care about him. He does call him traitor at the beginning, but that's probably just something to egg him on. But one thing you do see him is there's a lot of kind of lateral strikes to the blade, a lot of swats, and he does a move which we'll get into in a little bit more detail later, which kind of goes up, which I call the Kylo combo. And all of these things are very nice. They're simple, they're not overly flashy, and they seem fit for a purpose. Okay, so when Kylo comes in, he's coming in with strikes like this. Now, he uses this a couple of times in this whole sequence, and you'll see it. He'll come in with probably a sideways chop like this, or a downward chop, something like that. Here, coming around there. Now he does one of two things. Comes around like this to attack, or does the same thing and spins around and attacks. Now, if you watched our video, Fighting Like Kylo, we did a class which kind of trained a little bit like that. We did some real combat, so basically staying in front of your partner or your opponent, and then one for choreography where you're trying to get around quickly enough. Now, the way that it's used in this fight, I think, is actually very realistic. That first slash that he comes around with gets Finn, who again doesn't really know anything, to back up, go like this. As he starts to spin around, you see Finn kind of, and then he brings up when he figures that saber's coming back around again, he brings up his saber to block that shot. Now that's how that would be used if you were to use it. I'm not saying that's necessarily exactly how it's going to go, and I'm not saying that I'm recommending that you go out and start trying to turn around and all of that kind of stuff, because generally speaking, when you're facing one guy, turning your back to them when you're within weapon range is risky at best. So there's that. I, however, don't think that it's as much of a problem. It plays off very, very well there. The turn is taken, done. You never get the sense that the actors are waiting for the strike, and that's really important. Now, the other thing that's really cool about the Finn portion of this fight is when they are in the bind, he uses the crossguard, or the vents, really, to inflict damage. And that's one of the reasons, or one of the biggest pros that we always came up with, if you watch our crossguard saber, with the crossguards here. Now, the fight ends with Kylo releasing Finn and then trying to swipe at his head. Finn deflects that, gives him a cut across the shoulder. Kylo says, "Enough of this," binds, and then disarms Finn, and then we go on to the next portion. Okay, one thing that is often brought up as a point of contention in that last bit is how Finn was able to get that shot in on Kylo. And obvious reason, Kylo was overconfident at that time. And let's get this out of the way. The whole point of creating weapons is to get rid of a lot of that variance. I mean, when you put a weapon in somebody's hand, even if they're untrained, they become very dangerous. And it's a matter of a split second. You can make one little mistake, you can slip, and somebody's unguided and untrained sword can deliver you a blow. Now, the untrained, generally, they don't get a good one in, and he didn't. So, again, I think it's very dramatically appropriate, and it's also very character appropriate for where their levels are. So I got no problem with that. Now, the next bit transitions, of course, into the fight with Rey. Starts off with the beautifully dramatic Kylo Ren reaching for the saber, trying to get it to him, it flying past him and into Rey's hands, and then we get the classic music swell as she ignites the saber in the classic Jedi pose, and that's how it starts off. I mean, already it's really just talking about it. It's you can feel the Rey's intention and stuff like that. So it's a great moment. It's a great transition. Now we're going to transition into another type of fight here too. The Finn and Kylo was what I kind of consider a traditional arena duel type of fight, where you've got two guys and they're staying pretty much in place. They're in a particular environment and they're within that space. When the fight starts with Rey, we start moving through the scenery, and that brings a whole new dynamic to it. The whole thing is kind of contentious a lot of it, because they're like, well, Rey's never held a lightsaber before, even in The Last Jedi, Snoke says that. But the fact of the matter is she has trained with the staff, and that has an effect. In fact, in traditional martial arts, in Chinese martial arts, as far back as the Ming Dynasty, the rule has been that the stick, or learning the stick, is to weapons as is learning the classics is to literature and literacy. So the fact that she learned some stick and that she was pretty proficient with it, as we saw at the beginning of the movie, it's not a big far jump for me. Now she's using it again like we would see somebody who doesn't know exactly how to use it, so in an untrained fashion. She's doing these thrusts like this, right, which are very easy to deal with at the beginning of the fight. So you're just going to see a lot of her opening salvos are thrusting like that. And then it goes into just basically defensive blocking. At one point, she turns and runs. And that's great. That's exactly what happens. Now in the first salvo, you'll see Kylo does his thing, where she comes in with the thrust, and he blocks it like this, slashes for here, and then does another slash back, right, big. This is one of those cinematic moves, like this, and then kind of controls it with an orbit back there. Like I said, it's a cinematic move. You're not really going to do that in a real fight. The idea, I guess, is that he was just hauling off trying to take her head off or something like that. But it does illustrate one little important usage, even in real life. When you have an uncontrolled swing that goes out here, you have to find some way of controlling it, right? And one of those ways is to do an orbit. If you let your saber spin like that, you can let a lot of that momentum and built up kinetic energy out by going around in a circle. And that's what he does there. So I like that little touch. It's a beautiful way to frame it and film it, and the framing and blocking in this is just absolutely impeccable. The fight, when the fight goes into the little trench, and you've got these basic short cuts and blocks in this enclosed space, moving through it. It's just that's where it is for me. That little part is so great, and you can see the same thing. It's simple. It's simple. Back and forth like this every now and then, coming around here, going for an attack there, and this is where as they go through the trench there, boom, 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 boom. All of a sudden, Rey's just like, no more, turns and just books, Right? Now, we know that's not the greatest idea, and she finds out why, just as they climb the ridge. And then that continues, of course, that way, through the forest, and then to the crevasse, which appears there. They go into this kind of strange sequence where he pushes in like this, comes back like that, and then is able to bind her in like that. And that's where the dialogue about him becoming her teacher and all of that comes in. That part I also love. First of all, it's the classic Star Wars. You know, she gets the Force, she understands the Force, or understands that she can use the Force, or something like that. Very much like in Luke Skywalker in the first movie, in New Hope. The Kylo's motivation there, again, it's very very similar. And I know people complain about how similar it was, and now they're complaining how different The Last Jedi was. Whatever. This was a great little callback. It was a great way to put it in there, where Kylo wants her to join up, because he's not satisfied necessarily either, as we find out definitely in the next movie. So at that point, when he says, I can show you the Force, all that, she realizes what it is, and then this is where people have a problem. What happens there? Is she all of a sudden using the Force? Maybe. But I don't necessarily think you have to see it that she's using the Force. If she gets a little boost of confidence, or she gets a little realization, maybe, hey, maybe I shouldn't do this, right, as much, right? Maybe I should just actually try to do what he's doing instead of trying to back up and start coming in on him. And that's what she does, right? She breaks apart, he takes a couple of slashes at her, right? And then all of a sudden the tables are turned, right? She's got the pressure on him. She keeps coming through. Now, so this scene, and this part of the scene, really is focused on Rey's intention now to become more aggressive, to actually go for her opponent. And that's what she does right afterward. She comes in and basically just tries to hits. And what you can see is a different kind of style. At first she's doing this and doing lots of blocking and stuff like that, kind of using this like a sword. And what happens when she starts to overcome Kylo, right, is she puts her hands like this. And if you look real closely, you can see her holding it like this. And what that is from a stick. So she starts using it more like a stick, right? And coming through like that. Kylo doesn't know what's going on, can't match the movement, right? And she's able to get a shot off towards his leg, takes off part of his robe, right? Then, as she's kind of walking towards him, she gives him one of those, right? Almost as a taunt, right? Like, okay, I see what's going on now. Now, once you get that rhythm, and once you have somebody off their game like that, that is the kind of thing that you can do. So, whether you think it's realistic or not, it's analogous at least to a reality that's common amongst weapons practitioners. Now, why does she go into reverse grip, and why don't I have too much of a problem with it? I don't have too much of a problem with reverse grip. It has its uses. Obviously, this is a really good use. Would I do it in real life? Probably not. But I think it makes sense, and I just told you how it makes sense to me. And I'll just use this as the stick. And you can see that when you're using a stick, the tendency to use it like this in real powerful strokes is pretty easy. Now, if you know how to use one of these, this grip, in Chinese we call it yin hand, or yin shou, is good for defense and kind of close in. And what we usually use it for is a way to transition from being too close and being on the defensive into being more aggressive and attack oriented with this thing, and I think that's what happens with Rey, and I think it happens to great effect. It's it flows well with the story, and it shows Kylo being taken aback by it. Once that happened, once Kylo's off his game, once he's unbalanced and stuff like that, it's just a matter of keeping the pressure on. And that's what she did. Once he's on the ground, you can, you know, it goes, you know, it takes the normal kind of way. Now, the bind at the end where they're both kind of like the, you know, Rey's on like this and Kylo's this, and they're holding each other's saber right before she takes him across the face. Yeah, that's more cinema than it is that. However, that is definitely a position where you see people getting into all the time. Now, they don't stay there and struggle it out like they do usually, and they don't deliver dialogue. But regardless, and we've done videos on this before, you don't want to get out, oh, here, right? And it does happen. But, you know, as it goes, there are a couple of things when Rey brings the saber way back to come over there, very cinema oriented. But again, you're dealing with people, at least in Rey, who hasn't held a lightsaber. She's using it the way she thinks it should feel, right? So her using it in that very exaggerated fashion makes some sense to me. Now, would it work on Kylo? Yeah. At that point, I think he's so completely out of it, you know, there. Now, that's the other thing, too. Remember, at the very beginning of this, he was injured. You see him hitting himself at the beginning with Finn. You see him kind of struggling at times, you know, swinging and missing and all that kind of stuff. And I have to imagine he's exhausted just from doing all of this one after the other. He's got to be tired. So his body may have just given out. Regardless of why it is, I don't think that the end of that fight feels a little artificial to some, where it's like, oh, well, they just kind of had her overcome him. It didn't play like that for me, and it still doesn't. I still really, really enjoy this fight, this lightsaber duel. The scene itself, as I said, the drama, the story that's being kind of laid out here, that we are meant to believe these types of things, and then in Last Jedi, spoilers, we're told, yeah, Han Solo is still kind of full of it. It's a very, very nice homage to a lot of the old films. It's well choreographed. It's exciting. It moves, and like I said, you get character from it. From the repetition of the moves. Would people actually repeat moves like that all the time? Yes. Now, that's what fight choreography, a lot of that is based on. They do the same thing. Errol Flynn did this particular pattern over and over and over again, and you do different stuff with the body to make it look different. And that can take you a long way. In the prequels, I didn't think it worked. It was very obvious to me what moves were being repeated over and over and over again. Here, it felt like, yeah, I could see the moves were being repeated, but here they're being repeated for a particular reason. You know, they're there to show something. So the repetition that you see in there, take Kylo's move, right? And you can learn this. You can work this into your choreographies, as much as you want. You come in to the side, or you come in to the top. Go to the bottom, and then you're going to bring it up, slash the side again, or turn around, come in through like that. He does that multiple times, and if you notice, to a thrust, it works great. To a chop from this side, which is one of those really common ones coming from a right-handed person. So all of those things are taken care of very, very well by that one move. It is something that you would be taught, and it is something that is high percentage enough that before you became a master of your weapon, you would probably rely on a lot, right? Because it's going to give you a reliable outcome, right? You can parry that strike, and you can come in with another one, which is either going to get them to defend, back up, something. It's a good way that you can flow into. If you look through that fight, you can see that repeated over and over and over again. You can also see it kind of giving way into when he's in the trench, going back and forth. That same movement pattern, that kind of back and forth, flowing up and down. It's a very rehearsed but very effective pattern, and it's something that we would come to expect from someone like Kylo Ren. Now, should he have lost to Rey? Well, anything can happen in one of these fights. That's just what weapons fighting is. And when you're talking about lightsabers, the margin of error is very slim. So if you didn't buy the drama, if you didn't buy the character arc that happens to the fight, where somebody can have a well of strength at the end and overcome somebody by mere surprise and effort, okay, it's going to be difficult for you to really accept that Rey would defeat Kylo. I can totally see that. For me, though, it does not seem out of place. It doesn't seem strange. But anyway, so there you go. That's my analysis of the fight. I could probably go into it more, but these are the main points I stress. It's what I keep coming back to the fight for, and why I still enjoy watching it. So yeah, take it for what it's worth. I think that I don't recommend learning techniques from movies. Learning training exercises from movies is fine, but I'm not sure I would go for the technique. Looking at movies for technique. That being said, I think the technique is pretty good here. I had no problem with it. It didn't pull me out like Revenge of the Sith did, which I absolutely loathe that fight. But maybe I'll review it one day. This was stripped down, bare basics, character development, and drama, and that's what I want out of it. So there we are. Okay, well, again, Happy New Year, Happy 2018. You're either watching this just as we're going into the new year, or just as we've entered the new year. So thank you for sticking around with us all this time. We wish you all the best in the future and in the new years to come. We hope to be continuing to bring you cool stuff, and more of it, hopefully in the new year, with some cool new special features. So until then, have a great day. Happy New Year, and happy sabering.